WarmEarth Lab presents the 2037 open call for our annual residency series, Zone. WarmEarth Lab, or WELL for short, is a transient arts platform exploring the role of aesthetic practices in the pursuit of environmental well-being. In 2022, we were awarded a landmark contract for the remediation of Thamesmead marshlands as part of the £8 billion Peabody waterfront development. It was the first contract of its kind to adopt a cultural programme into a groundworks project at this scale. The marshlands exist in a state of third nature, a status we argue is essential to retain. Its previous use as a munitions factory, then as a bomb site landfill, resisted its redevelopment and allowed nature to reclaim the land as a site for human, non-human co-production. In this unlikely scenario, the contaminated soils that seep toxic metals into the Thames and threaten the marshland ecosystem were the very thing that defended its right to exist. The resilience of the landscape has therefore relied on a continuing performance of this cohabitation between toxicity and nature. Our 6-week zone residency invites artists to embed themselves within the landscape, to articulate this cohabitation, and to mediate the public's encounter with the hazard. You join us from the broadcast room at the heart of the marshes in what was historically known as the Danger Zone. The Danger Zone contains the remnants of pre-war dynamite factories called nitrators. It was here that the most hazardous chemicals were processed. The sequence of loose earth mounds surrounded by thick masonry shells would isolate any explosions, absorbing and projecting energy upwards. Through a series of performative interventions, these defensive qualities were reappropriated. The nexus of land contamination became a vessel for its remediation. The broadcast room was the first of such interventions. An inflatable structure was carried to site, traversing dense brambles, toxic swamp, and fence lines to be erected in Unit 137. Due to the challenges in access, the installation took on an adaptive format, a lightweight, non-invasive structure that would diffuse the ruins and condition them as a site for remote artistic engagement. This illegitimate occupation formed a point of leverage for the acquisition of the remediation contract, where we could exhibit the benefits of non-extractive remediation practices. In the years preceding, the broadcast room is cascaded into an ecosystem of spaces occupying the danger zone and the wider marshlands. The broadcast room was made permanent with a timber frame, lighting rigs, and communication infrastructure. A flexible studio exhibition space emerged. With adaptive walls, kitchen facilities, and an external performance space, the Danger Building has become the focal point for public engagement in the marshes. The remaining danger zone hosts infrastructure for agricultural remediation across the marshlands. Just as the tall earth mounds once contained the toxic chemicals, now they isolate their extraction, allowing public facilities to exist in proximity. WarmEarth Lab's remediation plan was structured around two strategies. Using existing borehole data, it was determined that the Greenwich fault line, an impermeable boundary in the chalk bed, intersected with the southern edge of the landfill. This means that contaminants were not able to pass through the groundwater to the south. By extending this boundary around the full perimeter of the landfill, a temporary barrier could prevent chemicals leaking into the Thames. In partnership with TfL and the recently opened Thamesmead DLR station, we were able to secure temporary use of their bentonite clay supply, a dense substance which is used in subterranean concrete construction. In this case, the bentonite arrived on site by the Thames. A small percentage of the clay could be used to form a slurry wall, with remaining material being reused at the DLR station construction. A 15-metre deep trench was dug around the perimeter. This was filled with a bentonite and water slurry. The slurry was then replaced with the extracted soil, leaving a non-permeable clay membrane between the zones of earth. Running parallel to the Thames path, the slurry wall formed both the boundary condition and the interface to the marshes. As the mediator of the public's encounter with the landscape, it therefore needed to articulate its hazardousness. WarmEarth Lab's internal design team therefore created a sequence of interventions in the process that might express the trench line as a piece of land art, perpetuating the militarised language of the danger zone. The second strategy employed a non-invasive phytoremediation program across the landfill zone. Over the past 15 years, specific flora has been planted and harvested before being transported off-site for incineration, gradually remediating the soil. Due to this agricultural transferal of the contaminants to above the ground, the landscape has remained hazardous. High levels of metals in the plants mean that they are toxic to consume, and therefore the encounter with the landscape must be mediated. The symbiosis between the landfill and slurry will therefore become more than just ecological. The boundary condition has played an important role in articulating the hazardousness of the landfill. The Zone Residency series sought to occupy this space, inhabiting the various boundary conditions with artistic interventions that might tell a cautionary and aspirational tale. The 15th year of Zone holds particular significance as it marks the completion of our initial remediation plan. A slurry wall has an estimated lifespan of around 15 years, meaning the purified groundwater is now free to flow into the Thames. The phytoremediation cycle has ended, relieving the landscape of its toxicity. Agricultural infrastructure in the danger zone is now being adjusted to meet the demands of ecological support rather than restoration. And the final phase of Peabody's waterfront development has defined a new boundary with the marshes, whilst retaining the landfill zone's metropolitan open land status. The 15th zone sits at a pivotal point in the shift in Wales' relationship with the landscape, from one of repair to one of nurture. If the third nature status of the marshlands is to be retained as a site for natural and cultural co-production, then it must be allowed space to recover from its agriculturalisation. The existing interventions across the marshes that articulate its toxicity must now become relics of the site's history and facilitators of its rewilding. Zone therefore invites participants to engage with acts of repair, alteration and augmentation of the existing infrastructure. We suggest that proposals be formed in proximity to two past projects, the original artists of which have given permission for their adaptation. After the construction of the slurry wall, art collective Muck determined that the boundary condition did not function effectively as an interface. It was simply a static line, rather than an inhabitable space. After asserting the therapeutic qualities of bentonite through its use in face masks and stomach pills, they proposed to extend the slurry trenches out to form mud baths. This counter-occupation of the boundary asserted the Earth as a co-productive partner. Scale is lost as humans and microbes occupy the same amorphous sludge. A geotherapeutic process is shared. The mud baths connected directly to the northernmost permeation in the boundary, coinciding with the satellite residency space at the old pillbox, which it was suggested was not public-facing enough. A local Thamesmead group identified that the current agricultural cycle was not reflective of the demographics of the area. Thamesmead has the highest percentage of Black African identifying population in the UK at 35.6%. They proposed that the local community might see themselves reflected in the landscape. The group performed an agricultural intervention in which they incrementally replaced the crops with Nigerian curryweed and various fungal species. Alongside this, the topsoils were augmented with a natural blue dye so that the plant life would adopt a virulent hue, resisting their consumption by local wildlife. Both projects have made a significant impact on our marshland territory, nurturing it as a model for human and non-human cohabitation. We invite you to join us on our continued occupation of the marshlands during this moment of immense shift. Thank you for listening to our extended open call. We look forward to receiving your applications.